The massive warship Starfall drifted through the endless darkness of space like a metal giant sleeping among the stars. It was the largest vessel in the Galactic Coalition fleet, home to thousands of soldiers from dozens of alien species. Its halls echoed with strange languages, and its walls glowed with lights of every color. This was the pride of the Valkorian Empire, and it belonged to Princess Zilara Voss. Zilara stood in the main hangar bay, watching the transport shuttle dock with disdain. Her silver eyes reflected the harsh lights above, and her pale blue skin seemed to glow in the artificial brightness. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, with sharp features and an expression that showed no warmth. Behind her stood Commander Drell Tannock, her most trusted advisor. He was an older Valkorian, his face marked with scars from 100 battles. "The new recruits have arrived." "Princess," Tannock said, his voice deep and formal. "I can see that," Zilara replied without turning. "Let us hope this batch is better than the last." The shuttle doors opened with a hiss of pressurized air. One by one, the recruits stepped out onto the metal floor. First came the Craxian berserkers, massive creatures with 4 arms and skin like gray stone. Each one stood over 8 feet tall and weighed more than a small vehicle. Their kind was known throughout the galaxy as the most fearsome ground soldiers in existence. Next came the Deshan scouts, slim and fast, with large eyes that could see in near total darkness. They moved like shadows, their footsteps making no sound on the metal floor. Then came the Valkorian warriors, proud and tall like their princess. They wore silver armor and carried plasma blades at their sides. They walked with the confidence of those who had never known defeat. And then, at the very end of the line, came the human. Jake Collins stepped off the shuttle and looked around the hangar bay. He was 26 years old, with short brown hair and green eyes. He stood just under 6 feet tall, which made him look like a child compared to the giants around him. He wore a simple gray uniform with no medals and no decorations. He carried a single bag over his shoulder. Zilara walked down the line of recruits, inspecting each one. She nodded at the Craxians with approval. She gave a small smile to the Deshans. She greeted the Valkorians as brothers and sisters. But when she reached Jake, she stopped. Her silver eyes moved up and down his body, and her face twisted with confusion. "What is this?" she asked. "A human, princess," Tannock answered, checking his datapad. "From the planet Earth. His name is Jake Collins. He served in something called the Marine Corps." Zilara leaned down until her face was level with Jake's. He did not step back. He did not look away. He simply met her gaze and waited. "This is what Earth sends us?" she said, her voice filled with disappointment. "A soft-skinned primate with no claws, no armor, no heightened senses? Look at him. He has no natural weapons. His bones are fragile. His skin tears like paper." Jake said nothing. His jaw tightened, but he remained still. "Can he see in the dark?" Zilara asked. "No, princess." "Can he survive in extreme temperatures?" "No, princess." "Can he regenerate lost limbs?" "No, princess." Zilara straightened up and shook her head. "Then, why is he here? This is a combat unit, not a nursery. I asked for warriors, and they send me this." Tannock cleared his throat. "His commanders speak highly of him, princess. The human admiralty says he's one of their best. His species has shown surprising ability in ground operations across several campaigns." "Surprising ability?" Zilara repeated with a cold laugh. "That is a kind way of saying they die less often than expected." Some of the Craxian warriors laughed. The sound was like rocks grinding together. Jake still did not move. His eyes stayed fixed on a point in the distance, his face showing no emotion. Zilara waved her hand in dismissal. "Put him in auxiliary support. He can carry supplies or clean weapons." Perhaps he can cook meals for the real soldiers. I will not waste a combat position on something so obviously inferior. Yes, Princess, Tanik said, making a note on his datapad. Zilara moved on to the next recruit, already forgetting the human existed. Jake watched her go. Oh, Jake, his expression calm but his hands forming tight fists at his sides. Over the next few days, Jake was assigned to the logistics division. He was given a small room in the lower levels of the ship, far from the warrior quarters. His duties included organizing supply shipments, maintaining backup weapons, and helping the engineering teams with heavy lifting. The other species on the ship ignored him. To them, he was barely worth noticing. He was not a threat. He was not a competitor. He was just a strange little creature that the humans had sent as some kind of joke. But Jake did his work without complaint. He arrived early and stayed late. He learned the layout of the ship until he could walk it blindfolded. He studied the other species, watching how they moved, how they fought, how they thought. At night, when the halls were empty, he would find a quiet corner and read. He read everything he could find about the Coalition's enemies. He read about the wars that had been fought and the wars that were coming. He read about the creatures that lived on the frontier worlds, the predators that even the Craxians feared. One evening, a young Beshan scout named Lyris Keth saw him sitting alone in the mess hall. She watched him from across the room, curious about the strange human who never seemed to rest. Why does he try so hard? She asked her friend, another the SSE, and her friend shrugged. Who knows? Maybe humans are just too stupid to know when they have already failed. Lyris did not laugh. She continued to watch Jake as he finished his meal and returned to his duties. There was something in his eyes that she recognized. It was not anger. It was not despair. It was patience. And somehow, that made her more nervous than any weapon could have. Jake Collins had been dismissed. He had been mocked. He'd been sent to the lowest position on the ship, but he was not broken. He was waiting. And in the darkness of space, where no one was watching, he began to prepare for what he knew was coming. 3 weeks passed on the Starfall, and Jake Collins fell into a quiet routine. Every morning, he woke before the artificial sunrise. He ate a small breakfast in the empty mess hall while the rest of the ship still slept. Then he reported to the supply bay and worked until his shift ended. The other species had stopped noticing him entirely. He was like a piece of furniture, something that existed in the background but held no importance. The Craxians walked past him without a glance. The Volcorians spoke over his head as if he was not there. Even the cleaning drones seemed to have more status than the human from Earth. But Jake did not mind being invisible. In fact, he preferred it. Every evening, after his duties were complete, Jake made his way to the lower cargo holds. These were the forgotten parts of the ship, vast empty chambers filled with old equipment and broken machinery. No one came down here. No one cared what happened in the shadows beneath. The Starfall's gleaming halls. It was the perfect place to train. Jake had built his own gym from the things others had thrown away. He used heavy crates as weights, lifting them over and over until his arms burned. He created obstacle courses from pipes and cables, crawling through them in complete darkness to sharpen his senses. He programmed the maintenance drones to attack him, using them as sparring partners to practice his combat skills. Every night, he pushed himself harder. Every night, he got stronger. On one such evening, Lyris Keth followed him. She had been watching the human for weeks now, curious about his strange behavior. He never complained about his treatment. He never argued with his superiors. He simply worked and then disappeared into the lower decks. She wanted to know why. Lyris moved through the corridors like a ghost, her Veshan training making her almost impossible to detect. She reached the cargo hold and pressed herself against the wall, peering through the doorway. What she saw made her freeze. Jake was in the middle of an intense training session. He was fighting 3 maintenance drones at once, their mechanical arms swinging at him from every direction. He ducked and weaved between their attacks, his movements fast and precise. When one drone got too close, he grabbed its arm and used its own momentum to throw it into another. He was covered in sweat and bruises. His knuckles were bleeding, but he did not stop. When the drones knocked him down, he got back up. When they hit him, he hit back harder. There was no quit in him, no surrender. Lyris had seen many warriors in her life. She had watched Craxian berserkers tear through enemy lines. She had seen Valkyrian knights fight with honor and skill. But she had never seen anything like this. The human was not stronger than his opponents. He was not faster. But he simply refused to give up. After an hour, Jake finally stopped. He sat down on a crate and caught his breath, his chest rising and falling heavily. That was when Lyris stepped out of the shadows. Jake looked up, not surprised. He had known she was there for the last 10 minutes. "You followed me," he said. It was not a question. Lyris nodded. "I was curious. The princess says humans are weak and useless. But you do not act like someone who is weak." Jake wiped the blood from his hands with a rag. "The princess has never met a human before me. She only knows what she has been told." "And what should she know?" Lyris asked, sitting down on a crate across from him. Jake thought about this for a moment. "On Earth, we were not the strongest animals. We were not the fastest. We could not fly. We could not breathe underwater. We had no claws, no venom, no armor. Every other creature on our planet had some natural weapon. We had nothing. Then how did you survive?" Lyris asked. "We learned," Jake said. "We watched the other animals and figured out their weaknesses. We made tools to make up for what we lacked. We worked together in groups. We never stopped adapting, never stopped improving. And eventually, we became the most dangerous thing on our planet." Lyris leaned forward, interested. "But you are just one human. You cannot work in a group here. You have no tools, no weapons." Jake smiled, a thin and tired smile. "I have everything I need. I have a brain that can solve problems. I have a body that can endure pain. I have something that most species do not understand." "What is that?" "Persistence," Jake said. "On Earth, we have a saying. It is not the size of the dog in the fight. It is the size of the fight in the dog." Lyris tilted her head. "What is a dog?" Jake laughed softly. "It is a small animal from my planet. They are not very big, and they are not very strong. But when they decide to fight, they do not stop. They do not know they are supposed to lose. That is what makes them dangerous." Lyris sat in silence for a long moment, processing this information. She had always been taught that strength came from physical power, from natural weapons and armored bodies. The idea that determination alone could be a form of strength was strange to her. "The princess will never give you a chance," she finally said. "She has already made up her mind about your kind." "I do not need her to give me a chance," Jake replied, standing up. "I will earn it, one way or another." He picked up his bag and headed for the door. Then he stopped and looked back at Lyris. "Do not tell anyone about this place," he said. "I would prefer to keep training in peace." Lyris nodded. "I will not say a word." Jake left without another sound. Lyris stayed behind, sitting alone in the empty cargo hold. She thought about the human and his strange philosophy. She thought about dogs and persistence and the size of the fight. And for the first time in her life, she began to wonder if the coalition had been measuring strength the wrong way all along. Over the following weeks, word began to spread through the lower ranks of the ship. The crew members who worked alongside Jake started to notice things. They noticed that he never got tired, never slowed down, never asked for help. They noticed that he learned faster than anyone they had ever seen. Some of them started to respect him. Others started to fear him. But Princess Zilara heard none of this. She remained in her command center, surrounded by her elite warriors, planning battles and reviewing reports. To her, Jake Collins was still just a name on a list. A minor mistake that she had already corrected. She had no idea what was growing in the shadows beneath her feet, and she had no idea that very soon she would need him more than she had ever needed anyone. The planet Draxon 7 appeared on the view screen like a green and brown marble floating in the void. It was a jungle world, covered in thick forests and winding rivers that stretched from pole to pole. The Coalition had established a small outpost there 2 years ago, a research station that studied the planet's unusual wildlife. 3 days ago, all communication with the outpost had stopped. Princess Zilara stood on the bridge of the Starfall, studying the planet with cold eyes. Around her, officers moved between stations, gathering data and preparing reports. What do we know? She asked. Commander Tanak pulled up a holographic display. The outpost was staffed by 40 researchers and 50 security personnel. Their last transmission mentioned unusual activity in the surrounding jungle. Then nothing. Insurgents? Zilara asked. Unknown, Princess. Intelligence suggests possible rebel activity in this sector, but nothing that should threaten a fortified position. Zilara nodded slowly. Prepare 3 combat teams. We will investigate personally. The dropships launched an hour later. Zilara led the mission herself, bringing 200 of her finest warriors. Craxian berserkers filled the first ship. Valkorian knights took the second. Theshan scouts spread across both, ready to provide reconnaissance. Jake Collins was not among them. He remained on the Starfall, watching the ships disappear into the atmosphere from a window in the cargo bay. He had a bad feeling about this mission, though he could not explain why the dropships landed at the edge of the outpost clearing. Zilara stepped out first, her plasma blade humming at her side. The jungle surrounded them on all sides, dark and silent. Too silent. Spread out, she ordered. Search the buildings. Find survivors. The warriors moved through the outpost like a well-trained machine. They checked every room, every corridor, every shadow. What they found made even the hardened Craxians stop and stare. The researchers were dead. All of them. Their bodies had been torn apart with terrible violence, scattered across the floors and walls. The security personnel had tried to fight back. Their weapons lay beside them, still warm, surrounded by hundreds of spent shell casings. They had fired until they ran out of ammunition. It had not been enough. What could do this? Tanak asked, his voice shaking. He had seen many battlefields, but nothing like this. Zilara knelt beside one of the bodies, examining the wounds. The cuts were deep and clean, made by something incredibly sharp. The pattern suggested claws, but larger than any animal she knew. Then she saw the footprint. It was pressed into the bloody floor, nearly 3 feet long. 3 toes ended in curved talons. The print was deep, suggesting a creature of enormous weight. Zilara felt her blood turn cold. Varax, she whispered. Tanok went pale. That is impossible. The Varax were contained on the Craxian moons. They could not have reached this sector. Clearly, our intelligence was wrong, Zilara said, standing up. We need to leave. Now. But it was already too late. The first attack came from the jungle like a nightmare made real. A shape burst from the trees, moving faster than any creature that Sai should move. It was over 9 feet tall, covered in black armored plates that gleamed like polished stone. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness. Its claws were as long as swords. The Vorax hit the first Craxian before anyone could react. 400 pounds of muscle and armor meant nothing. The berserker was dead before he hit the ground. Then more shapes appeared. 10, 20, 50. The jungle came alive with red eyes. Fall back. Zilara screamed, drawing her blade. Everyone fall back. The battle was chaos. Plasma fire lit up the darkness as the coalition warriors fought desperately against the Varax horde. But the creatures were too fast, too strong. Their armor deflected most weapons. Their claws cut through the strongest metal. Zilara watched her finest warriors fall one by one. Craxians who had never known defeat were torn apart. Valkorian knights who had trained their whole lives died in seconds. The Veshan scouts tried to run, but the Varax were faster. To the command building, Tanak shouted, "We can fortify there." The survivors retreated into the largest structure, sealing the doors behind them. There were less than 30 of them now. Zilara, Tanak, Lyris, and a handful of wounded soldiers. The rest were dead or missing. The Varax surrounded the building, their red eyes visible through every window. They did not attack immediately. They were patient hunters. They knew their prey was trapped. "Can we call for extraction?" Zilara asked. Tanak shook his head. "The jungle canopy is too thick. Dropships cannot land here, and the Starfall cannot provide air support without risking our position. Then we fight our way out." "With what?" Tanak replied, gesturing at the survivors. "Half our warriors are injured. We have limited ammunition, and there are at least 100 Varax out there." Zilara looked around at the faces of her soldiers. She saw fear in their eyes. Real fear. These were warriors who had faced death many times, but they had never faced anything like this. "Then we die with honor," she said quietly. Lyris stepped forward. "There might be another way." "Speak," Zilara commanded. "The human," Lyris said. "Jake Collins. He's still on the Starfall." Zilara almost laughed. "The supply worker? What could he possibly do against the Varax? I have watched him train, Princess. He is not what you think he is. His species has qualities that we do not understand. They are survivors in ways that we cannot imagine." "One human against 100 apex predators?" Tanak said. "That is madness." "Perhaps," Lyris admitted. "But it is also our only chance." Zilara was silent for a long moment. Outside, the Varax began to howl, a terrible sound that shook the walls. They were getting impatient. The attack would come soon. "Send the transmission," Zilara finally said. "Ask for volunteers for a rescue mission. But do not expect anyone to answer." The message was sent to the Starfall. It explained the situation clearly. The princess was trapped. The elite warriors were dead or dying. Anyone who came to help would likely die. Within 5 minutes, a response came back. One volunteer had stepped forward. One person had agreed to enter the jungle alone and face the deadliest predators in the known galaxy. Jake Collins. Zilara stared at the message on her datapad. She did not understand. Why would the human risk his life for people who had dismissed him? Why would he walk into certain death? She did not know the answer yet, but she was about to learn. Jake Collins stood in the dropship hangar, checking his equipment one final time. A plasma rifle hung across his back. A combat knife was strapped to his thigh. His pack contained medical supplies, water, rope, and a collection of small devices he had built himself during his time in the cargo holds. The flight crew watched him with a mixture of confusion and pity. They were certain he was going to die. "You understand what you are doing, human?" the pilot asked. "The Varax have killed 200 elite warriors. You are one man with a rifle." Jake pulled on his tactical vest. "I understand perfectly. Then why?" the pilot asked. "The princess treated you like garbage. She called you inferior. Why risk your life for her? Jake paused and considered the question. Because that is what humans do. When things get bad, we do not run. We do not hide. We face the darkness and we fight. It is who we are. The pilot shook his head but said nothing more. Some things were beyond understanding. The dropship launched 10 minutes later. It flew low over the jungle canopy, searching for a clearing large enough to land. There was none near the outpost. The closest safe zone was 3 miles away. 3 miles through Varax territory. Jake jumped from the ship before it even touched the ground. He rolled through the tall grass, came up on his feet, and disappeared into the tree line. The pilot watched him go, convinced he would never see the human again. The jungle was dark despite the afternoon sun. The canopy was so thick that barely any light reached the forest floor. Jake moved carefully, placing each foot with precision, making no sound. He had grown up hunting in the forests of Earth, tracking deer through the Appalachian Mountains. This was not so different, except the deer back home had never hunted him back. He found the first Vorax tracks within 20 minutes. The prints were fresh, the soil still wet. A hunting party had passed through here recently, probably moving toward the command building. Jake counted the prints. 6 creatures, all large. He followed them. The coalition species thought of the Vorax as unstoppable. They saw the armor, the claws, the speed, and assumed there was no weakness. But Jake knew better. Every predator had a weakness. You just had to be patient enough to find it. He watched the Vorax from the shadows for nearly an hour, studying their movements. He noticed things that the others had missed. The creatures were fast, but they were also predictable. They followed the same paths, moving in straight lines toward their prey. They relied on their physical power so much that they had become careless. They had never needed to be afraid of anything. That was about to change. Jake began with a simple trap. He found a narrow path between 2 large trees and stretched a thin wire across it at ankle height. Then he moved back and waited. The first Vorax came through 20 minutes later. It was a scout, smaller than the others, but still terrifying. Its red eyes scanned the darkness as it moved, searching for prey. It did not look down. The wire caught its foot and the creature stumbled. In that single moment of confusion, Jake struck. He burst from the undergrowth, drove his knife into the joint between the creature's head and neck, and twisted. The armor there was thin, protecting mobility over defense. The blade sank deep. The Vorax fell without a sound. Jake dragged the body into the bushes and disappeared again. 1 down, many more to go. Over the next 3 hours, he moved through the jungle like a ghost. He set traps using vines and branches. He created false trails to lead the hunting parties away from his true position. He used fire and sound to create diversions, drawing small groups of Vorax into ambushes. One by one, he picked them off. The pack leader noticed that something was wrong. Alpha 7 was the largest Vorax in the group, a massive creature that had led his pack for decades. He had never lost a hunt. He had never known defeat. But now, his scouts were disappearing. At first, he thought they had simply lost their way. Then he found the bodies. Something was hunting his hunters. Alpha 7 let out a roar that shook the trees. He gathered his remaining pack, nearly 40 strong, and led them toward the source of the disturbance. Whatever was killing his scouts would pay with blood. But Jake was not finished. He had spent his time well. The perimeter of the command building was now surrounded by traps. Tripwires connected to explosive charges. Pits covered with leaves and branches. Fire lines ready to ignite at the touch of a button. The jungle had become a killing field. Inside the command building, Princess Zelara heard the explosions begin. She rushed to the window and saw fire erupting from the tree line. Shapes moved in the flames, dark figures stumbling and falling as they triggered trap after trap. What is happening? Tanak asked, joining her at the window. The human, Lyra said, her eyes wide. He is here. Jake emerged from the smoke like a demon from legend. His uniform was torn and covered in blood. His rifle blazed as he fired at the remaining Varaks, drawing their attention away from the building. He was screaming something in his native language, words that sounded like a battle cry. The Varaks turned to face this new threat. They saw a small creature, barely half their size, standing alone against their entire pack. By all logic, he should have run. He should have hidden. He charged straight at them. Alpha-7 met him in the center of the clearing. The pack leader was over 9 feet of armored muscle, a nightmare made flesh. He looked down at the tiny human and felt something he had never felt before. Uncertainty. Jake dropped his rifle and drew his knife. He had studied the Varaks for weeks, reading every report, every analysis. He knew their armor had weaknesses at the joints. He knew their eyes were sensitive to sudden bright light. He knew that their greatest strength was also their greatest flaw. They had never needed to fight smart, so they never learned how. Alpha-7 lunged, his claws slashing through the air. Jake dove to the side, rolled under the attack, and came up inside the creature's guard. His knife found the gap at the knee joint and cut deep. The pack leader roared in pain and stumbled. Jake did not give him time to recover. He moved like water, flowing around each attack, striking at every weakness. The other Varaks tried to help their leader, but they got in each other's way. They were used to hunting prey that ran. They did not know how to fight something that attacked. Alpha-7 swung again, but his injured leg betrayed him. He fell to one knee. Jake jumped onto the creature's back, grabbed the ridge of armor at his neck, and drove his knife into the soft tissue beneath the skull. The pack leader fell. The remaining Varaks stood frozen. Their leader was dead. The invincible predator had been killed by something small and soft and supposedly weak. For the first time in their existence, the Varaks knew fear. They fled into the jungle, disappearing into the darkness. They would not return. Jake collapsed onto the ground, his body finally giving out. He had dozens of cuts, several broken ribs, and more bruises than he could count. Blood ran down his face from a gash on his forehead, but he was alive. And so was Princess Ilara. The door of the command building opened, and Lyris ran out to Jake's side. She knelt beside him and pressed a cloth to his wounds. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." Jake looked up at the sky and laughed weakly. "Told you." Size of the fight. Then he closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. The rescue shuttles arrived at dawn, breaking through the clouds like angels descending from heaven. They landed in the clearing that Jake had created with fire and blood, their engines sending waves of heat across the scorched earth. Medical teams rushed out first, carrying stretchers and emergency equipment. They found Princess Ilara and her surviving soldiers standing in a loose circle around a single figure lying on the ground. Jake Collins was barely breathing. His body was covered in wounds, some deep, some shallow, all bleeding. The medics worked quickly, injecting him with stabilizers and sealing the worst of his injuries. One of them, a tall Valkorian with gentle hands, shook his head in disbelief. "How is he still alive?" The medic asked. "These wounds would have killed anyone else hours ago." "He is human," Lyris said quietly. "They do not know how to die." Jake was loaded onto the first shuttle and flown directly to the Starfall's medical bay. The best doctors in the fleet were waiting for him. For the next 12 hours, they worked to save his life, fighting against injuries that should have been fatal. Against all odds, he survived. Princess Ilara spent those 12 hours in silence. She sat in her private chambers, staring at the wall, thinking about everything that had happened. She had dismissed Jake Collins as weak and useless. She had sent him to carry supplies because she thought he was too fragile for combat. She had looked at his soft skin and small body and seen nothing worth respecting. And then he had walked into a jungle full of apex predators and killed them with his bare hands. She did not understand. She could not understand. How could something so small and seemingly helpless be so dangerous? Commander Tanak came to see her late that evening. He stood in the doorway, waiting for permission to enter. "Come," Zilara said. Tanak walked in and sat across from her. His face was troubled. "I have been doing research," he said, "about humans, about their history. And what did you learn?" Tanak took a deep breath. "They are not like us, Princess. They did not evolve as apex predators. On their homeworld, they were prey. They were hunted by larger, faster, stronger animals for hundreds of thousands of years. And how did they survive?" Zilara asked. "They adapted," Tanak said. "They learned to make weapons. They learned to set traps. They learned to work together in groups. But most importantly, they learned something that no other species in the galaxy truly understands." "What is that?" "Endurance," Tanak said. "Humans can keep going long after any other creature would have given up. They can run for hours without stopping. They can survive injuries that would kill us. They can push through pain and exhaustion and fear because they simply refuse to accept defeat." Zilara was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. "I called him inferior. I said he had no natural weapons." "You were wrong," Tanak said gently. "His weapons are not visible. They are inside him. His will, his determination, his refusal to surrender. These things are more dangerous than any claw or fang." Zilara stood up and walked to the window. She could see the stars stretching out before her, countless worlds and countless species, all of them thinking they understood what strength meant. "I need to see him," she said. The medical bay was quiet when Zilara arrived. Jake was lying in a bed surrounded by machines that monitored his vital signs. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady. The doctor said he would recover fully, though it would take time. Zilara stood over him, looking down at his face. He seemed so ordinary, so unremarkable. If she had passed him on any street in the galaxy, she would not have given him a second glance. But now she knew the truth. "You saved my life," she said softly. "You saved all of us. And I never even gave you a chance." Jake's eyes opened slowly. He looked up at her and said nothing. "Why?" Zilara asked. "Why did you come for us?" "I treated you terribly. I dismissed you as worthless. Why would you risk everything for people who had shown you no respect?" Jake considered the question for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice rough and tired. "On Earth, we have a saying. You do not earn respect by demanding it. You earn it by giving it freely, even to those who have not given it to you." Zilara felt something she had not felt in many years. Shame. "I was wrong about you," she said. "I was wrong about your entire species." "You judged us by what we looked like," Jake said. "Most people do. It is easy to see small and soft and assume weak. But what matters is not what you are born with. It is what you choose to become." Zilara reached into her uniform and removed a medal. It was the Star of Valkyr, the highest honor she could give. She had never given it to anyone outside her own species. She had never imagined she would. She placed it on Jake's chest. "When you are healed," she said, "I want you to train my warriors. All of them. I want you to teach them what you know." Jake looked at the medal, then back at the princess. "Are you sure?" "I am just a human. I have no natural weapons." For the first time, Zilara smiled. "That is exactly why I need you." 3 months later, Jake Collins stood in the main training center of the Starfall. Before him stood 300 coalition soldiers, the finest warriors from 12 different species. Craxian berserkers, Valkorian knights, Dacian scouts, and many others. They looked at the small human with new eyes now. They had heard the stories. They knew what he had done. Princess Dilara watched from the observation deck above. Beside her stood Lyris and Commander Tanuk. "Do you think they are ready to learn?" Tanuk asked. "I think they are ready to listen," Zilara replied. "That is the first step." Below, Jake began to speak. His voice was calm and clear, carrying across the silent room. "My name is Jake Collins. I am a human from Earth. I am here to teach you something that my species learned a long time ago. Something that has kept us alive through ice ages and plagues and wars that lasted generations." He paused, looking out at the faces of warriors who had once looked down on him. "I am here to teach you that strength is not about what you are born with. It is about what you are willing to endure. It is about getting up when you fall. It is about fighting when others would run. It is about never, ever giving up." He smiled, the same thin smile that Lyris had seen in the cargo hold those months ago. "I am here to teach you how to survive." And for the first time in the history of the Galactic Coalition, the mightiest warriors in the universe sat down to learn from the smallest and weakest creature among them, because they finally understood the truth. Humans were not weak. Humans were something far more dangerous. They were survivors. And now, so would they be.